You've heard of the 50-30-20 rule. 50% of your income on needs, 30% on wants, 20% on savings and investing. Simple, clean, totally makes sense on paper. So why does almost nobody actually follow it? And why, even when people try, does it stop working within 60 days? Today, we're getting into what the 50-30-20 rule actually gets right, what it gets dangerously wrong for most Americans in 2026, and what a version of it looks like that you can realistically follow without lying to yourself about your budget. Because here's the thing, the problem isn't that you lack discipline. The problem is that the rule was designed for a different economy than the one you're actually living in. Let's start with what the rule is and where it came from. The 50-30-20 rule budget framework was popularized by Senator Elizabeth Warren and her daughter Amelia Warren Tyagi in their 2005 book All You're Worth. The core idea was simple. After-tax income split three ways: half to needs, a third to wants, a fifth to financial goals. It was designed as a financial literacy tool, a starting point for people who had no framework at all, not a precise formula for building wealth. Here's what happened to it. It got copy-pasted across every personal finance website, every budgeting app, every beginner money article for the next 20 years without anyone updating the underlying math. And the math changed dramatically. In 2005, when the rule was written, the median American household spent approximately 32% of after-tax income on housing. Today, that number is closer to 41% for renters in major metro areas, according to Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies. Housing alone, one category, already exceeds the entire 50% needs allocation in many American cities before you've bought a single grocery item. This is why the rule feels impossible to follow. It isn't your discipline failing. It's a 20-year-old framework colliding with a completely different cost structure. Drop in the comments, have you ever actually tried the 50-30-20 rule and had it fall apart within the first month? Because I hear this constantly and the data backs it up. Let's run the real numbers on what 50-30-20 rule actually looks like for a median American household in 2026. Median household after-tax income approximately $54,000 annually, or about $4,500 per month, according to Census Bureau data. 50% for needs $2,250 per month. Sounds reasonable until you add it up. Average rent for a one-bedroom in a mid-sized American city, $1,200 to $1,500. That's already 55 to 67% of the needs. Bucket before utilities, groceries, transportation, insurance, or phone bills. Add average monthly utilities around $200. Groceries for one person, $350 to $400, according to USDA food cost data. Basic transportation, including car payment, insurance, and gas, if you're outside a major transit city, $600 to $700. Health insurance premiums averaging $300 monthly for employer-sponsored coverage. That's anywhere from $2,600 to $2,800 in actual needs for a single person living modestly, already over the 50% ceiling. And we haven't touched student loans, which average $386 monthly for borrowers on standard repayment plans. The needs bucket doesn't fit in 50% for most Americans. That's not a personal finance failure. That's housing costs, growing 427% since 1990, while the budgeting rules stayed the same. So what happens to the 30% wants and 20% savings categories? Here's where the personal finance system quietly falls apart for most people. Because when your needs are already exceeding 50% of income, the math doesn't add up, So people do one of two things. They underfund savings and tell themselves they'll fix it later when they earn more. Or they redefine needs to include things that are genuinely wants, which makes the budget look balanced on paper, while the savings rate stays near zero. The Federal Reserve's most recent report on household economic well-being found that only 40% of American adults could cover a $400 emergency expense from savings without borrowing. 40%. The budgeting rule has been widely known for 20 years, and the savings behavior hasn't caught up. This isn't about financial literacy. For beginners being missing, most people know they're supposed to save. The gap is between knowing the rule and having a version of it that actually works for their real numbers. Here's the practical fix. And this is what separates people who build wealth from people who keep trying and failing at the same budget every January. Stop starting with the 50-30-20 percentages and work backwards from your actual fixed costs instead. Step 1. Calculate your true fixed costs, not what you think they are. Every recurring mandatory payment for the next 30 days, rent or mortgage, utilities, insurance, phone, minimum debt payments, transportation, groceries at your real average spend, not your optimistic estimate. Add those up. That number is your real baseline, not 50% of income, your actual floor. Step 2. Whatever is left after true fixed costs, split it deliberately before it touches a spending account. This is the key move that most budgeting frameworks miss. Not a split on paper. An actual automated transfer on payday that moves money before your brain categorizes it as available to spend. Even if the savings portion is 8% instead of 20%, automate 8% first. That 8% invested consistently will build more wealth than 20%. You plan to save, but never did. Step 3. Adjust the wants category to whatever remains honestly, not whatever feels comfortable. And build in one specific wants category that you actually enjoy so the budget doesn't feel like punishment. A budget that feels like punishment gets abandoned. A budget with intentional spending on something you genuinely value, even a small amount, gets maintained. This is what I'd call the real numbers approach to budgeting, not percentage targets that look elegant and work for nobody. Your actual fixed costs, your automated savings percentage regardless of how small it starts, and your honest discretionary reality. Here's the other thing. The 50-30-20 rule quietly gets wrong that nobody mentions. The 20% savings category treats all financial goals identically. Emergency fund, retirement, paying off credit card debt, saving for a house, all lumped together as 20%. But these have completely different urgency levels and completely different financial returns. Credit card debt at 24%. APR costs you money at a rate no investment reliably beats. Paying off high-interest debt first is mathematically the highest return move available to most people, better than any investment, better than any savings account. Yet the 50-30-20 rule gives it no special priority. The correct order for that 20% isn't save everything equally. It's fund a small emergency buffer first, $1,000 minimum to stop new debt from forming when something breaks. Then, eliminate high-interest debt aggressively, because every dollar of 24% APR debt paid off is a guaranteed 24% return. Then build the emergency fund to 3 to 6 months of expenses. Then invest the remainder for long-term wealth building, ideally in tax-advantaged accounts like a Roth IRA, where compound interest works for you instead of against you. That sequence buffer, high-interest debt, full emergency fund, then investing will build more actual wealth than mechanically splitting 20% across all categories simultaneously. Here's where we land on the 50-30-20 rule. It's a useful introduction to the concept that budgeting requires three categories: obligations, lifestyle, and future. That framing is genuinely valuable for financial literacy, but it's not a working budget for most Americans in 2026. The percentages are based on a 2005 cost structure that no longer exists in most cities. What works is tracking your real fixed costs honestly, automating whatever savings percentage is actually possible right now, and sequencing your financial goals by return debt first, buffer second, investment third. That approach builds real wealth. The elegant percentages build a budget that looks good and gets abandoned by February. If this changed how you see budgeting, subscribe. Every week, Scott Finance breaks down the specific mechanics behind personal finance tips that sound right but work differently in practice. The people who subscribe are building something real. Hit the button